All right, welcome to Senior Living 101, where we get expert takes on the environments where seniors live, work, play, heal, and thrive. This is sponsored by SAGE, the Society for the Advancement of Gerontological Environments. And fun fact, everybody who you're hearing in this web series is a SAGE member. So if you want to be part of the genius action that's going on here, totally recommend you go to sagefederation.org and look into becoming a member. In this session, we're going to talk about physical and sensory considerations with respect to design for aging. And I am joined here, me, Trey King, I'm your host. I'm joined here today by the esteemed Jami Mohlenkamp. Jami, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Trey. I'm excited to be here today. My name is Jami Mohlenkamp. I'm a principal with Oz Architecture. I lead our older adult practice area, and I've been an architect now for about 28 years. Love the profession, and I really got into older adult design because my first job in high school was actually working at a senior living community in town. And so that really just opened me up to the environments and interactions with older adults that were outside of my own family. And it's just become an absolute passion project for me.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, yeah, kind of on that note, what I would be interested in hearing a little bit from you about, what you think are some unique considerations for designing from a sensory and kind of physical standpoint. What are some unique considerations to designing for the aging population?
Absolutely. Well, this is a great question because, sensory experience changes as we age, and we all know that. And one of the interesting things, I mean, Trey, you and I do the same thing, is that we have never been an older adult yet. So we're trying to design environments that we have not had to live in ourselves in that same
Yeah.
sensory experience. But what we typically find is that the average older adult is facing a number of challenges that maybe when they were younger they were not facing. These include things like, their vision inside of a space, how they can visually see things, and what all of those cues mean for them. And vision is probably one of the most important ways that we all experience space. So really honing in on their vision challenges, and how we can help to design and support those is really important. Along with those, though, there's a lot of other number of factors like hearing is really important, and we find that a lack of hearing in environments can cause a social isolation. You can be surrounded by people, but if you can't hear the conversation, you're really kind of alone. And so that becomes pretty critical as well. Balance and mobility are really important. So one's ability to move safely through a space becomes really critical as well. So we want to watch for those things to provide confidence in a space. And I think that's a real big thing is I think that people become wary of movement in a space far before they're incapable of moving through that space. So the more we can give them
Totally.
cues that they're going to be safe, it's really going to help us out. And then cognition, reaction time, and thermal comfort are all more mental sensory experiences or interpretations. But how we design a space for those becomes really critical as well.
Yeah. Actually, can we drill down a little bit on that? I would love to hear from you. We're both designers in spaces for aging, and just like kind of head to head on like what you see as kind of differences within the spectrum of care. A couple of episodes we talked about kind of introducing our audience to the continuum of care. IL, AL, skilled memory care. Can you talk a little bit about like what considerations may make the most sense in what area?
Absolutely. So if we start on the lower end of the spectrum of acuity and aging, we'd be talking about more of like an active adult or independent living resident, right?
Yeah.
And for the most part, those residents are going to be pretty capable. They're going to be able to move around pretty well, et cetera. But it's probably in the point in their life where they're starting to see decline happening the most, right? So their physical capabilities, their eyesight's probably deteriorating over their time in independent living, et cetera. So I think that what we tend to find there is really making sure that, again, the visual stimulation is there, but I think a lot of acoustical considerations are really important. So, going to a large theater space or a fellowship hall or a gathering space like that, and making sure that the sound is appropriate for them is really, really pretty critical. And from the visual side, I think visual stimulation and sensory experience is going to happen across the entire spectrum, but because it involves things like lighting, right? And making sure that we have enough lighting in a space. And Trey, I'm sure you've seen this. A lot of codes even dictate really, really high levels of lighting in older adult spaces to where we look at it and we're like, wow, that seems like really, really bright, but it really is important for the aging eye. And especially more like task-based lighting, like having task lighting on a counter or under counter lighting so that they can see more immediately. And it's not just about bright lights on the ceiling that cause shadows, right? It's really about trying to create a space where they can work becomes really important. And it's not just about throwing a bunch of light in a space because then there's contrast of surfaces, right?
Yeah.
So we don't
Yeah.
want we don't want like an all-white room with a white couch and white flooring, and you can't tell the difference of those things. Because even in an independent living level, falls are a really important consideration, and the contrast of different surfaces and furniture to flooring, even bathroom fixtures when it's night and they just have a night light and it's darker, you can have a very capable person who's still struggling to read some of those differences in color. So it becomes really critical on the contrast side. And frankly, I think even this gets to wayfinding. So even an independent living adult resident is um, very capable of moving through spaces, but finding ease of wayfinding becomes very important. And I would say even just sort of, subtle wayfinding. So we like to try to design wayfinding as much as possible without using signage. And I'm sure you guys are the same,
Yep.
right? So different floors have a different color to them. So when the elevator doors open, I don't have to look for the sign that says you're on the fourth floor. I just know I live on the green floor or the blue floor or whatever. And I think a lot of those can become really important. And as we age up the spectrum, they become far more important because, as we know, when you get to a higher level of acuity, like assisted living, possibly even memory care, you're really potentially in a place where floor patterning may be a problem. You know, dark and light
Yeah.
contrast on the floor can create this perception of holes or things that have to be stepped over. And then again, you have a resident trying to work in mobility situation that doesn't even exist. So I think a lot of those things are really important as well. When we talk about hearing and acoustics, I just think that can hit you at any age, right? Like there's no one level where that comes in. So I think that proper
Yeah.
acoustical design is critical throughout any acuity level for sure.
Yeah, awesome to hear, especially in the context of for those of you who are listening, check out the episode before this where we talk specifically about memory care environments and designing for Alzheimer's and dementia. And Jamie, you hit every point. It's awesome. Like it's so glad to hear that the community is like really like dialed in on these issues. Yeah, and another thing we talked about in that episode was you can be a really great designer. You can wear like a world-class design hat. And if you don't know about some of these considerations, like it's not going to be great. You could have a great, we talked about like, you could design a super handsome carpet tile and specify it in like a common area. And if it's really high contrast and scares residents off, like if they're, not sure what's going on down there, they're not going to use it. So I'd love to hear your take on what some of the biggest kind of mistakes you see designers make. In the field who maybe aren't acquainted with some of these, best practices, rules of thumb for designing for aging.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you hit so many of them on the head right there. I think it's really just a fact that code compliance for older adult design does not mean comfort or sensory experiential design. And so,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people who enter the space do go that way. It's kind of like, well, we complied with the codes and whatever. But it's just not right. And you can comply with the codes and have an institutional building from 60 years ago that nobody wants to live in. And that's not what we're looking for. So I do think that there are some real good advancements in that way. And as many in the industry are familiar with, there's the Facilities Guidelines Institute. And even in that, document that we all have to comply with, there's so many things that really promote a better environment within a space. So to kind of your example, Trey, we've seen hospitality designers enter and they design something like a really high-end hotel, tile floors, a lot of big drywall volume spaces and so on. And the acoustics just are terrible within those. So it's just really remembering that we need some things like soft furniture or, acoustical panels on the wall, or we need to think about the volume of the space and how noise reverberates through that space. These are all like really important considerations.
Yeah. I really love what you said just then about code uh, encouraging and facilitating a very institutional environment in a lot of cases. I think that would be a great future episode. So maybe we'll see you again.
I
But
love it.
But totally agree. It's kind of it's an uphill battle, right? Like, a lot of times you need, for instance, like door closers on doors that make the sensory environment of entering and leaving your house like so uncomfortable. And especially for somebody with reduced muscle mass, you're not going to enjoy coming home if you've got to open what feels like a 100-pound door to get in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And exactly what you're saying, mobility devices really change up all of those things, right? Like
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
thinking about the physical space when you go in a, say, a dining room setting, or let's say there's like a lobby with some living room furniture set up. If the furniture is set up in a way that's great for people who can walk capably, but it's not great for wheelchairs, it's not great for other mobility devices, you're also going to find a social isolation that's going to happen there because people will feel the need to change the space, or I don't want to go there because it's fussy or whatever. And so just really making things that we try to say, like, you go back to the very simple universal design principles, just make it good for everybody at the same time. So the space
Yep.
just works for everybody because you never know. And a spouse, your spouse may be healthy today, they may decline rapidly for some reason in the next couple of months. So you don't want to have to move to a different space because of that. You want your space to support you. And that's really what we're looking for in a lot of these sensory experiences is not just getting around a problem, it's really trying to create confidence and independence within the residents so that they feel comfortable, being as independent as they can for as long as they can.
Yeah. Right. We're all aging. We should all be encouraging this kind of thing happening outside of just senior living environments. I totally agree. Yeah, actually, so sort of to that end, I'd be interested in hearing from you about what sort of your read on what's changed in the last 10 years. How has your design practice towards sensory design and design for aging changed over the last decade?
Yeah, well, we've done a lot of things to try to improve our design. One is that we've created a room by room checklist with materiality. So we can look at a particular space. We can start to talk about where the glazing is so that we can know where natural light is coming in and how to handle that natural light. Like we want to bring it in, and
Yeah.
everybody's drawn. This comes back to another sensory experience, which is biophilic design and a connection to nature. So we want everybody to have that connection. So it's really important to analyze that. It's important to look at lighting acoustics. It's important to look at finish applications, where they're going, and all of these things. And I
Yep.
think that that's one of the biggest things that's probably changed in our world is that we used to think about those things, and now I think it's absolutely critical and mandatory. Like you can't just think about it. You've got to address it and you have to do something about it. And I think that we've seen a change from institutional design to a more hospitality oriented design in ways to combine hospitality and home. But within all of that, it really has to have a strong functionality to it. So I think that that's the things that we've really pressed for the most is just, making sure that things are truly thought of and not just thrown in there or that's what we did the last time, but really intentionally looking forward to that experience.
Yeah. No, couldn't have said it better, man. Awesome stuff. Um, yeah, so okay, one other, I guess, next question for you. We've talked about a lot of different design strategies and accommodations and considerations for sensory, um, uh, sensory challenges, sensory like experiences that differ as we age. If you could pick one design consideration and put it kind of on the top of the heap as the number one thing that maybe an uninitiated designer should be doing more, what would you pick? If you could prioritize it, maybe like a power
Well,
ranking.
yeah, that's really tough for me. I would say anything with vision is probably my number one
Yeah.
priority. But I want to say that this is like a tight race. It's not like first and second is way down there. It's like here's first, here's second, like they're really close. I think those acoustical considerations following next become really important because if we can't see or hear and how our brain interprets that information, it really does start to isolate people for sure. I do think that, like I said, mobility, balance, and the confidence that that can provide becomes really important underneath that. And then one that I think that it kind of back to your question about over the last 10 years has become a real focus on sensory wellness and cognitive health. And I think that we know in broader society, the idea of mental wellness and mental health has become a much more socially acceptable conversation. People don't have to feel as, like I can't bring up my mental health because people will judge me because of that. It's become much more open in those ways. And I think that those are things that 10 years ago people were starting to talk about, but today, it's almost maybe overused, the idea that, oh, we're a wellness community. But the benefit of that is people really are looking for all of those ways to support wellness holistically. And I think a lot of that, again, that sensory wellness ties to a natural connection to the outdoors and things like that. Like we've seen so many communities in the past, maybe the farther past, where it was you come into the lobby and people are just sort of sitting there. They're maybe heavily medicated. The room doesn't feel good. It smells terrible. There's not a sense of life. There's not a sense of activity. And it's a really dreary place. And I can't say that any of the residents I've seen in those situations want to be there. The families don't want to come visit. And I think that when you flip that script and go the other direction and really focus on resident wellness, you focus on staff wellness and sensory experience, and you turn that back to everybody else, the families visiting, people actually spend more time together. You know, you find families come and they want to stay. It's not the obligation to just visit mom. It's like, no, I like this place. The food tastes good. It smells good in here. The
Yeah.
people look happy. I want to be here. And that's really the environments that we want to create. I feel like 10
Yeah.
years ago, people were saying, hey, we don't warehouse people. And we agree with that. But I don't hear people saying that anymore as much, which really tells me that the industry, I think, is shifting in the right place to really
Yeah.
be a life experience.
Yeah, totally. My team at HKS and I talk about this all the time. Like, we're designing home, right? And it's like it's crazy that it's such a radical idea that like we're reinventing the idea of taking an institutional environment and just making it home, like making yeah, putting a residential kitchen in, putting, reducing the scale of the building so there aren't 60 people in a double loaded corridor. That's not really home, right? Like you
Right.
could filter so many of these things you're talking about with respect to sensory experience through the lens of like, what is it like when I come home from work and like am in just my I always come from work like take my shoes off, kick my feet up, and like I'm in heaven. And there so many of these things you're talking about, like if we were to implement them, like another great way of thinking about it might just be like, how do we recreate that feeling, the feeling of being home,
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love it. And Trey, you just explained it in a way that I'm going to give you a pat on the back for because so many people say, let's make it home-like. And I have a
right.
client in particular that always looks at me and she's like, does your home feel home-like or does it feel like home? And I'm like, well, of course
Yeah,
it feels like
yeah,
home. And so you never said home-like one time. So kudos to you. And I think that that is really important is we need to remember this is where people live every day and it needs to feel like
yeah,
home to them. So
yeah. No,
yeah,
totally, totally.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome, Jamie. I don't know, any other like last kind of closing thoughts just to wrap us up?
You know, I think we've covered a lot of the things that are really important to me in design. And I think it's just important to say that, you know, successful communities like older adult communities aren't just supporting aging within the building. They are really supporting independence. They are really creating someone's ability to continue to live on their own in the way they choose. And I think that the more we as designers just really sit back and ask ourselves, okay, when I come into this room, what does it feel
Yeah.
like? What do I see? What do I hear? What do I smell? How do people see me in return? And then just really considering all of those experiences around the table from, you know, residents to staff to visitors. It's really important because we want the same thing for our staff too. We want them to have this as a place where they thrive on the daily too.
Yeah, yeah. And just to add a little cherry on top to like kind of quote an earlier version of our conversation, like, you know, it's a little bit different, right? For people who are like who have sensory impairments of various kinds. Like maybe what we consider home is a little bit different, and we should be taking some of these ideas that we were just talking about and implementing them everywhere. Maybe it's a redefinition of what home looks like for all of us. Like, I mean, that's the whole premise of universal design, right?
100%. I agree with you.
Yeah,
And one thing we found helpful, I'm sure you've experienced this as well, but any ability to go back and revisit some of the spaces you've designed after they've opened up is really huge. So the idea
yeah,
of a designer or an architect spending the night or 24 hours in a project is nothing new, but having done it myself, it is really life-changing. And then we've done things amongst our team here in the office where we bought a wheelchair and we took turns using the wheelchair around the office. Like each of us would take it for a day and then we would just keep cycling it so that it became a little bit of a routine. The way I would come and sit under furniture and the furniture may be hitting my legs because I didn't realize
right.
I'm elevated above a chair and there's a bracket under there now. It changed how we design countertops. And then we got the glasses that replicate all of the different vision impairments. And one of the things
Yeah,
we talked about is aging eyes start to view things as yellow, right? So we got a pair of yellow
yeah,
glasses and we're looking at our finish palette through those glasses and going, what does this look like? But you know, those, and then when I did my overnight stay, they bound one of my arms so I couldn't use my arm because I was like, oh, I'll just
Yeah.
wheel myself around. And they're like, well, no, we're going to take one of your arms away. All of those things, like, and it sounds, I was like, oh, okay, fine, I'll figure it out. No, I couldn't. I could not move myself. Like, it was really, really challenging. And just one more lesson learned from that stay that I'll share that was a very sensory experience was the room that they were letting me stay in, when we got to it, I think we did a good job with the design. It looks very welcoming coming into this apartment. But there was a sconce on the side of the door that just gives some light and whatever. And it looks great
Yeah.
when you're standing there. When I was sitting in the wheelchair, what I realized is that it wasn't shielded on the bottom, of course. And it
Yeah.
glared in my eyes really intensely. And so even when they were wheeling me into the room, I can remember like it was like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. Like, and it's just those little things that because we don't experience it from that perspective that we don't always see. So I just think as designers, it's really critical to do our best to try to use our own spaces within the capacity that our end users use them as well.
Totally. And I love especially what you said about using them in a 24-hour cycle, right? Because sometimes if you come for like a 1 hour POE, maybe it's like, oh, well, nobody ever uses the gym. Maybe everybody uses the gym at 3 p.m. Maybe you're just not seeing it. And in addition to, I guess this is branching a little bit off of our sensory point, but yeah, like there's just so much to be like gleaned from that kind of like sleepover and the 24-hour like understanding of how your sort of existing community is working and how people are experiencing it. Yeah, especially with respect to some of those like, crutches that you're putting on yourself for experiencing the space. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a good sensory experience for me.
Yeah, no, no,
Yeah.
I feel you. Our firm does a similar thing, and it's like we should trade notes on it sometime because
Agreed.
it's such a unique like empathy building experience. Really, really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
Yeah, man. Well, this was really awesome, Jamie. Thanks so much for coming and talking with us. Yeah, and for our listeners at home, if you want to learn more, we're going to include Jamie's email along with this video publication on our events page at sagefederation.org. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, go ahead and email me at tking@hksinc.com. And I think my email and contact will also be up on the page there. And you can also email info@sagefederation.org. That'll take you straight to our kind of questions, comments source. So all sorts of ways to get in touch if you enjoyed this and want to hear more or have specific ideas that you'd like to hear us drill down a little more on. So yeah, thanks for being on. Really enjoyed the conversation and until next time, everybody.